What is communications management and project management? What is communications management and project management? Actually, darn good question. I'm glad you asked. What we're going to cover here is the fact that although you may not realize it, you do a fair amount of communications management already, even if you don't necessarily do it in quite as formal a format as you would in project management. So kind of be clear about that. Now, it becomes important because in many projects, the communication channels and keeping the relationships with your stakeholders healthy with high trust is what communications management is supposed to deliver for your project. And that's why it's so important to you. It's funny because some of us, I'm not saying you, I am confessing to it being me, used to think that you didn't have to really tell people stuff all the time because really what you needed to do is just do your job, do it really, really well. And well, you don't need to tell them that you're doing the job. Do you? Oh, wow. Please do not get the scar tissue that I got by finding out that not having a plan for how I communicated status and situations to my key stakeholders, like my boss, could pose a real problem. You see, you're not front of mind for them. You're not the top most important thing that is going on in their mind at any given point in the day. And it's kind of ironic, don't you think? Because they are the ones who asked you to take on this project, and they are the ones who kept mentioning how important it is. So how come they're not thinking about us all the time and our project team all the time and our project all the time? Well, it's because we're not the only project that their team is executing on. So keeping them appraised, keeping them informed isn't just about making sure that they don't get any nasty surprises. It is also about making sure that they remember you're there, that they see just how much trouble you are taking to make sure that this project runs smoothly on their behalf. Because remember, while this project may be a temporary state of affairs, typically, if you're working for someone, that is a slightly less temporary state of affairs. Sometimes. But that means that your relationship with your boss and the level of trust that you establish with that boss is going to be really, really important. And if you don't help them build that trust by demonstrating on a regular basis why they can trust you with your project, with the goals that that project is supposed to achieve, well, it's kind of it's kind of hard to raise the level of trust, raise the strength of that relationship. You're going to have to put some effort into it. And we're going to talk about a couple of things to do, but we're also going to mention one or two things that maybe you want to avoid. So a couple of things to think about. One, make sure that you know who else needs to know any kind of information. And even if your boss is not listed on a formal communications plan in a formal stakeholder analysis, add them. After all, they're a key stakeholder in your management. Because project management is about having a process. This is just wonderful, let me tell you, because when you have a process, that means that you know exactly what it is that you need to do. It also means that you can tweak it as necessary. And it means that you have a predictable way of going about it that gives you a much cleaner opportunity for success. Trust me on this. Step 2, make sure that everyone on your team is clear about the process and what to expect as a result of participating in the process. This is not a solo activity. Communications management should involve the entire team on a regular basis. And in the very first steps of that process, identifying stakeholders and what they care about, the rest of your team is going to be wonderfully valuable because they're going to be able to give you information that they may think you already have, but that you don't. And you're going to be in a position to share information that you may presume they already have, but honestly, they don't. And this is an opportunity to build some trust with your team members. Not a bad idea. Now, a couple of things that you want to make clear, because if you don't make this clear, it can play havoc on everything. There's something called boundary management in communications management and project management. Boundary management means, at its simplest, there's information that stays within the team and there's information that goes out to the greater stakeholder community. It does not mean that we sacrifice transparency. Now that is important because boundary management is why you, as the project leader, as the project manager, are responsible ultimately for all of the ways that the communication is going to affect the relationships with people. I had a client who didn't really understand how important it was that he educate his team on the topic of boundary management. So one day, when one of the key stakeholders on their project ran into one of the coders on the project in the facility, to pass the time, this director asked, "So, how's it going on project XYZ?" Oh my, the coder was having a really hard time with some of the quality management testing. It was a bad time to ask that that person that question. But it got asked, and for some reason or another, because the coder didn't understand the implications of what he was about to say, what came out of his mouth was, "Oh my God, this is dreadful. It's horrible. I don't know how we're ever going to get this thing out the door in time with any kind of decent quality anyway." Needless to say, the director was a little bit concerned. Before you know it, there were meetings with senior leadership, the project manager, and then threats of one with the client before everybody figured out that the coder was having a bad day. The quality assurance and quality control steps weren't giving them the results they wanted. They were giving them the results that were, which is we have to do a little bit more work. We have to do a little bit more debugging. But that didn't mean that we were in any way, shape, or form in trouble on the schedule. And what that coder, if they had understood boundary management, might more productively have said was, "Wow, there's a lot going on. It's kind of a complicated project, but why don't you check in with Leslie? She'll be able to give you an overall picture of how things are going. I've just got my little spot here." And then leave. So don't ignore the importance of letting people know the difference in boundary management and communications of what stays within the team, who's responsible for communicating things outside of the team, and who's not. because ultimately we figured out that with all of the people who were involved in that series of meetings, we spent over $100,000 figuring out that nothing was wrong. Oh my God. You don't want to be responsible for something like that. And you can avoid it easily just by making sure that you remember to include discussions on boundary management. Don't ignore that. It's a big deal. We're going to go into a lot about communications and communications management and project management because that is a key function of you in your role as the project manager, as the project leader. So if you got something out of this video, please hit the like button. And if you want to see what else that we can offer you on this topic or any number of other topics in project leadership, please subscribe to our channel so that you can get updates about when the newest video is going to be dropped. Thanks very much for joining us.